The feeling of loneliness when Matthew is away is something I cannot avoid. The large house in Clapham, a quiet area of London, always brings me peace. But when my husband is away on business, that peace becomes a burden. Matthew works in consulting, and his job requires him to travel quite often. Sometimes he is gone for a few days, but sometimes his business trips last for a week. Whenever he is away, I clearly feel his absence in this house. That feeling seems to fill the space, making me feel very lonely. I cannot deny that life with Matthew is very stable and happy, but when he is not here, everything seems to become dim, lacking the warmth that only he can bring. When I wake up in the morning, I am alone in the large room, and when I return from work in the evening, the house seems to become an empty space. Every sound in the house seems strangely quiet and deserted. I tried to make the silence less intense by playing music, watching TV, or listening to audiobooks, but nothing could fill the void inside me. After dinner, when there was no one to talk to, I could only sit there, alone in the living room, with the big couch and the TV on but no mind to watch. My thoughts kept spinning, and I couldn't shake that feeling of loneliness. Everything became quiet, just me and my thoughts. Fortunately, I wasn't completely alone. Rocky, my Rottweiler, was my loyal companion during those days. Rocky had been with me for the past 5 years since he was a clumsy puppy. Although he couldn't replace Matthew, Rocky's presence always helped me feel less lonely. Even when Matthew was away on business, Rocky was the only friend I could turn to. He was always there for me, and Rocky's presence was a comfort, helping to ease my sense of emptiness. The gentle wagging of Rocky's tail when I petted him was a reminder that even though Matthew was gone, I still had a friend here. When I felt lonely, Rocky was a rock. He might not speak, but every glance Rocky gave me seemed to understand my feelings. And even though I sometimes felt Matthew's absence, when I looked into Rocky's eyes, I felt like I wasn't completely alone. But what was special was that I realized my relationship with Rocky was more than just a human pet companionship. It was more than that. As each day passed, I felt more like I relied on him, not just to ease my loneliness, but for another reason. The way Rocky looked at me, the way he was always there for me when I felt stuck, made me feel as if he understood me in a way that no one else could. There were no words, no need to say it, but I could feel the sympathy in those eyes. And that feeling, no matter how hard I tried to deny it, grew stronger every day. Every night when Matthew was gone, it wasn't just the silence of the house that made me feel empty. It was the feeling that Rocky was filling a deep void inside me. A void that I hadn't realized was so big until his presence became so indispensable. He wasn't just a dog, not just my companion. He was a part of me, as if he had touched corners of my soul that I didn't know existed. The moments Rocky and I shared, when he lay beside me, his tail wagging in the air, made me feel something deeper than just friendship. That feeling grew. Every time he lay obediently at my feet, every time I stroked his silky fur, I sensed that, beyond what I could see, there was an invisible, incredibly strong bond between us. There were times when I wondered if I was caught up in a strange feeling, a closeness that I couldn't name, but couldn't deny. The way he always sensed when I was sad, when I needed a little comfort, when I wanted someone to be there to feel less lonely. Those eyes, always looking at me with tenderness and understanding, made me unable to help but feel an irresistible pull in my heart. But the truth was, whether I wanted it or not, I had begun to rely on Rocky more and more. His presence had become an indispensable part of my life, a part that I couldn't simply shake off or ignore. And every time I sat alone, my thoughts gradually became clearer. I realized that while I was looking for a support, a comfort, Rocky had been there all along, like a friend who never gave up on me. Rocky was not just a companion in the quiet evenings, but he became an indispensable part of my life. Gradually, Our relationship was not just the companionship of a human and a dog, but became something deeper, beyond what I had ever imagined. Every time I felt empty inside, just bending down to stroke his soft fur, I felt like the world around me suddenly became more comfortable. The warm feeling from Rocky's body transmitted to me. It was like an invisible embrace, gently embracing my soul, soothing all the worries and pains that I could not put into words. The strange thing was, every time I looked into Rocky's bright eyes, I saw not just a dog, but a true friend. He didn't just understand me emotionally. It was as if he could sense the broken pieces of my soul that I had never dared to face. Every look he gave me was filled with understanding and warmth, as if he had lived in the depths of my emotions for a long time, just waiting for me to notice. The bond between Rocky and I had gradually become something inseparable, an invisible but strong thread, binding me to him in a way I had never imagined. And then one night, as I sat alone on the couch, in the silence of my room, I realized that Matthew's absence no longer felt as lost as it had before. I still loved him, but the emptiness inside me had been filled with something else. Rocky, with his silence, taught me how to make peace with loneliness, how to face the deep thoughts that I did not want to admit. I no longer needed just a companion, but a companion with a heart that understood me down to the smallest detail. There were nights when I could not sleep. Thoughts kept spinning in my head, but Rocky was always there, lying next to me, his head resting on my leg like an unspoken promise. I felt clearly, deeply, in every breath he took, that he was not just a dog. He was a true friend, who was always there for me in my weakest moments, who could make me feel secure without saying anything. And in that moment, I suddenly realized that our relationship had gone beyond a normal friendship. It was not a simple existence of two creatures living under the same roof. This bond is an understanding, a connection that I cannot find in anyone else, not Matthew or any other friend. Rocky is not only a loyal friend, but he has become a part of me, like a part of my soul, that now I cannot imagine my life without him. With each passing day, I cannot deny that the relationship with Matthew is gradually changing. There is something unspeakable growing inside me, a vague distance that I cannot understand. The days of living together, we have built a stable life, but more and more I feel like what we have is just a habit. The mornings are no longer filled with laughter. The late nights are no longer shared, but only silence. Both Matthew and I seem to be absorbed in our own lives. He is constantly on business trips, and I, with the long evenings, only Rocky is by my side. I don't want to admit it, but every time Matthew is away, I realize one thing more clearly. The distance between us is not just about space, but about emotions. We have become so used to each other, so used to our daily routines that we no longer pay attention to the important things. The conversations are no longer deep. The hugs are no longer warm like before. I begin to feel as if we are living in the same house, but actually in different worlds. Sometimes I wonder if we really understand each other anymore. Meanwhile, Rocky is always here, not leaving me for a second. He doesn't ask me questions I don't want to answer, doesn't make me feel guilty about things I haven't done, doesn't judge me. Rocky doesn't need any explanations. He just quietly stays by my side, understanding me in a way I never thought possible. Every time I felt lost, those moments when Rocky lifted his head and looked at me reminded me that I was not alone. My relationship with Rocky was growing deeper and stronger, a solid support that I could not ignore. And then, one day, when I looked at myself in the mirror, I realized what I could not admit. I had relied on Rocky too much. He had become the only person I could share all my feelings and worries with, without fear of judgment. I had relied on Rocky's empathy to fill the void that Matthew could not see. But was I seeking comfort in a dog's friendship? Was I too dependent on a relationship that should not have been there? The guilt rose up in me like a tidal wave, but I could not stop. Rocky was the only person who did not leave me, who was always there when I needed him. In a changing world, when I didn't know where to go, I only knew that there was one place where I always felt loved and understood, and that was with Rocky. That feeling made me sink deeper and deeper into an emotion that I couldn't explain. But was it in these moments that I truly realized that what I lacked was what I found in Rocky? Was I lost in a relationship that no one but Rocky and I could understand? This feeling, like an invisible string that bound me, making me unable to escape even if I wanted to. This relationship, although not perfect, made me feel loved in the purest way perhaps I had never received from anyone, including Matthew. As each day passed, I couldn't help but ask myself, was I too dependent on Rocky? Was I looking for something in this relationship that I never dared to face? That strange feeling grew inside me, like a smoldering fire that I couldn't put out no matter how hard I tried. I found something in Rocky that I couldn't find in anyone else, an understanding that didn't need words, an invisible connection that I couldn't explain. Rocky was always there, asking nothing. Just being there was enough. But the closer I got to him, the more I felt like I was falling into a conflicted situation. I loved Rocky's presence, loved the way he was quietly by my side, but it was also because of him that I began to realize the gaps in my life, gaps that I had previously only known how to hide, leaving them in thoughts that I did not dare to admit. Now, when I faced those feelings, I could not help but ask, is this love overwhelming the other relationships in my life? The truth is, I cannot deny that every time Matthew was away, I felt the relationship between me and Rocky deepen. Rocky was not only the only friend left by my side, but he had become a part of my life that I could not separate. He understood me so well, it was as if he could sense emotions that I couldn't put into words. And in those moments, I realized that I had begun to give Rocky a part of my heart that I had reserved only for Matthew. Sometimes, I felt like I was living in a confusing truth, a reality that I didn't know how to handle. How could I explain this feeling? How could I tell myself that I needed not just a companion, but a soulmate? Someone who I believed could see and understand all that I couldn't tell anyone else. This dependence, though gentle, became a strong bond, making it impossible for me to leave Rocky. And that made me feel like I was living in a world where there was only him and me. No Matthew, no one else. I didn't want to say these feelings, didn't want to admit that I was lost in a relationship that perhaps I shouldn't have felt this way. But inside me, there was something undeniable, a connection stronger than all my words or thoughts. And then I wondered, had I found what I had been searching for all along in this strange friendship? Had I really found a pure, unselfish, undemanding love that I had never received from anyone else? That question kept spinning in my head, leaving me unable to find a clear answer. But in that moment, as I sat next to Rocky, as I stroked his soft fur, I knew that I had found something precious. And perhaps it was time for me to accept this truth. The truth that sometimes the things we seek do not always come from the relationships we expect. Maybe I had found what I needed right in a loyal dog, a soulmate that I did not realize I needed until it was too late. Every time I sat quietly with Rocky, stroking his soft fur, a strange sense of comfort invaded my soul. Those moments felt as if time stopped, the world around faded away, leaving only me and him in the warm silence. That feeling, even if it was just for a brief moment, made me realize that I was not just looking for companionship, but also for peace. A place where I could let go of all my worries, let my heart breathe. It was in moments like these that I found myself slowly accepting the difficult truth that I had tried to avoid for so long. Not all relationships are about people, and sometimes friends are not always who we imagine. Rocky, with all his loyalty and pure love, taught me that comfort can be found in unexpected places. He did not judge me, did not ask anything of me, simply was there, a sincere presence that helped me face myself. Although I could not articulate this feeling, I felt it deeply in every breath Rocky took. He didn't have to say anything. He didn't have to do anything. But Rocky's eyes, those eyes full of understanding and tenderness, were like a mirror that reflected back every emotion, every thought I dared not admit. He, just being him, filled the voids I couldn't understand in my heart. And every time I stood in front of the mirror, looking at myself, I saw another truth that I couldn't deny. I had come to depend on Rocky in a way I couldn't explain. He had become a part of my life, a part I couldn't live without. Sometimes I wondered if I was hiding from something bigger, a feeling of loneliness, a lack that I didn't know what to do without Rocky. But it was Rocky, in his silence, who taught me that comfort doesn't always have to come in words. Sometimes the presence of someone, even a dog, is enough to ease unspoken anxieties. The way I began to see Rocky was more than just a dog. He was my loyal companion, my source of motivation, my light when I felt lost. When the days were long and boring, when loneliness was all around, it was Rocky who made me feel like I still had a reason to wake up every morning, a reason to keep going. So, as I sat in the silence, just me and Rocky, I realized that the bond between us was not just a silent communication, but a deep connection, a spiritual salvation that I could not find anywhere else. And although I could not fully explain these feelings, I knew one thing for sure. In this world, where everything seemed to be changing, Rocky was the only thing I could trust, the only thing that gave me absolute peace. And as those moments became a part of my life, I began to realize that the love I felt for Rocky was more than just friendship. It was an indispensable presence, a salvation that I couldn't explain. Even though I was confused about my feelings at times, what was undeniable was that this bond filled a void that I didn't know how to fill any other way. When I looked into Rocky's eyes, I felt like I found a comfort, a spiritual support that I never realized I needed. There were times when I felt like I had surpassed my own limits. I shouldn't have felt so dependent on a dog. But Rocky made me realize that love doesn't always come from the people we expect. Sometimes, empathy and closeness come from the most unexpected places. And that's what I felt from this relationship. Every time I stroked Rocky's soft fur, when he lay next to me in the quiet evenings, I no longer felt lonely. That feeling made me realize that not all loneliness can be filled with human words or actions. Sometimes, comfort is simply the presence of someone. No need to say anything, just being there. And in this moment, I understood that, although the relationship between me and Rocky could not be defined in words, it still had a deeper meaning than I had ever imagined. Finally, I suddenly realized that my life was not only about Matthew or anyone else. Whether they were absent or not, Rocky was still an important part of my world. He was not a replacement for anyone, but a source of motivation, a wordless friend that I could turn to in the most difficult times. And it is this friendship, with all that it brings, that has taught me how to face loneliness and find peace in the simplest moments. When I think about the future, I no longer feel as fearful or uncertain as before. I know that no matter what happens, I have Rocky by my side, a loyal and steadfast friend, an irreplaceable presence. And perhaps that is the most important thing I need in this life.